Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the very important things that we need to understand is that in order for us to grow on this journey, to break the mold and to evolve, is for us to create a distance between ourselves and ourselves, as if to look on to ourselves as instructors and parents, and to recognize ourselves at times as unruly children, and to know that condemnation of the child is only going to exacerbate the situation within the mind of the child. The child needs compassion, mercy, care. Now, as parents, when our children are unruly, it pains us more because we know that they are damaging themselves. Not because we want a good name through our children, but it is because of our care for our children. We do not require anything from our children but their happiness and their success. So in many instances, we will give in to our children, monitor them, and steadily allow them to work through their weaknesses, wasteful tendencies, and arrive at a state of optimality within their own beings, to come of age, to be able to govern their lives accurately, and that is when we will find rest. Same level of intimate care is needed by us for ourselves. The phrase that says charity begins at home, the only home we have in the truest sense is us ourselves. That is where charity begins. Unfortunately, we fall into this trap of condemning ourselves, of writing ourselves off, that we are no good, and loathing ourselves. This further adds to regression. I had a friend at college who was a brilliant mind. Just before the exams, we were talking and he broke down in tears. And he said, "I'm not going to pass." And I said, "You are the most brilliant student we have in class." He said, "I know, but I miserably fail on the day of exam. I just get very confused. And I have done this exam previously and I failed. So I know now I'm going to fail again." The only failure there was himself not treating himself in a different way. He was carrying those memories, and those memories had rid him of his confidence. And as a result, he was going to perpetuate that failure. Or like me, I went into a driving test very arrogantly, and I knew I could pass. It's just a walk through the park. I mean, after all, it's me. So I did the driving test and got carried away talking with the examiner and forgot to stop at the stop sign. And I had one major fault and I failed. And I said, "How is that possible?" The next time round, again, with my arrogance, I went in. And I drove the car through the crossing, and the examiner said, the other car was coming at a speed. You should have stopped. One major fault. And the third time I went, my God, I was so humble. I actually had tears in my eyes. I looked at the sky and said, "Allah, please. If I fail this time, I don't know how to go back home." The embarrassment of it all. So when the examiner was talking with me, I said, "Please don't talk with me. I'm nervous. I made so many mistakes." But the examiner said, "Look, I'm the examiner, not you. You've passed. Now just go home." You see, we need to understand ourselves differently to the way we are understanding. We are both the emotional aspect and the rational aspect. The rational aspect can detach itself from the emotional, look onto the emotional and start governing it. Now we have to understand first and foremost that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with a physical and a psychological constitution. He has given us all these tendencies that result in what we call sins. The deadly sins, let us say, greed, lust, overindulgence. These are our natural bodily and psychological constitutions. That's the way we are. We have to recognize that by default we are like that. However, it is these very tendencies, if understood accurately, they can make us. The Quran said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Indeed, is successful the person who purifies the soul. If there was no scope of purification, there would remain no scope of growth. So the very tendencies that we have that impel us into transgression and what we call sin, those are the tendencies that are supposed to act as means for our growth and evolution. They are first and foremost not to be frowned upon. They are to be understood accurately. And then, very carefully, we have to temper them. There needs to be temperance. And we need to allow them to give us growth instead. So when we lie in order to procure some benefit, that is a wrong and a sin. But if we loathe ourselves for it, and hate ourselves for it, and condemn ourselves for it, then that tendency is going to be deepening and that act is going to be perpetuated. But if we were to examine ourselves and say, look, you've done wrong, then reason with ourselves, but you believe in God and you believe in destiny. Whatever good you secured through that act of lie, you believe would have come to you in any case. God says, He gives sustenance and He withholds it. What need did you have to do that? What that does is that next time round, when a similar opportunity presents itself, we will opt for saying the truth. Now that tendency of wanting to lie is a huge potential. It gives way to a lot of goodness of saying the truth and embracing God, breaking the mold and allowing us to reach to our greater self. Similarly, the want of vengeance, overpowering our enemies. Once the soul does that, to talk to the soul and to say to the soul, what gave you greater growth? The momentary joy and satisfaction of overpowering your enemy? Or would you have gained greater wholesomeness had you forgiven your enemy? Had you not undermined them and left their dignity intact? And the soul would understand that actually doing the reverse would have been better. Same with every tendency of sin. It can be looked at in a different way, and we can explain to the soul by forgiving the soul, allowing the soul a second chance. So there is a very important aspect of this whole process, that when the soul feels a begrudging feeling, it wants to curse the other person, and we know that the soul actually cannot understand beyond that at this point, then to allow the soul to do that. Allow the soul to curse, to swear, to pray against, so that the soul is relieved of its burden. Once it's relieved of its burden, then immediately go back to the soul and say, you've allowed yourself this, now stop it there. It's fine. You have become lighter inside. The burden has gone. Don't do it anymore. So it's like a child. When the child really wants sweets, you cannot withhold the sweets from the child. You will have to give it something. So the soul has to be nurtured in this way to understand it so accurately. Wherever it cannot do without its tendencies, give in a little. And then remind it and try and purge it of that tendency. Similarly, as the hadith explains, that the soul has states of expansion and contraction. When it wants to expand, spread it over voluntary devotions. When it's constricting, limit it to obligations only. The way we do with children. When they feel motivated, we give them a lot more tasks, a lot more books to read. When that motivation is not there, we say to them, at least do your minimal homework that you need to do. To be acutely aware of the soul, not to frown upon it, but give it a second chance, direct it, guide it. But we ourselves have to be the guides for the soul. In this way, we can allow the soul to grow and to deepen and to mature. The message I would like us to take away from this particular discussion is to think that, do we actually need instructors from beyond ourselves? Or can we ourselves be our own instructors? By distancing ourselves slightly from ourselves, looking over ourselves and looking at ourselves, and seeing our behaviors, being mindful of our weaknesses and our strengths, of our different states of existences, and then to govern ourselves accordingly. An unruly child will not become angelic overnight. We have to be realistic. It will be a process. We need to maybe allow ourselves to undergo that steady, slow process. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.